Good afternoon. I'm here for session 3, I believe, of 5,000 in the World. Actually, it might be the 4th one we've done. Anyways, this is the project where I'm working on a collection of stories and sayings and experiences that my dad had over the 101 years of his life. And every week on Friday, I want to share either part of the process with you or one of the chapters. They're relatively short. It's almost devotional style at this stage, but or one of the chapters or just a backstory to the stories. So far, we've talked about his kind of what I call the origin story, where he left home for the first time, really on his own, and without any plans of coming back anytime soon, and the resourcefulness and the grace and the blessings that fell on him in that initial journey away from the house. Following that, we did a review of 1916, some of the historical and demographic information of that period, because that's the year my dad was born, and just kind of compared to the world he was born into versus the world the way it was when he left. And then we did a chapter on his approach to insurmountable odds and his faith in God's will and his own abilities. And today, I want to talk about a couple of sayings, a couple of things actually that my dad didn't want us to say. Although most of the stories I'll share are things he liked to say, today I want to focus on two things he didn't say and he didn't like us to say it either. And he was really pretty adamant about it. Not any kind of corporal punishment kind of way. That wasn't really his style. But he was always very encouraging to us to use alternative ways of expressing ourselves than these two expressions, and he really didn't put up with them very much. He would stop other people from talking this way towards us, and he made sure we didn't talk this way to each other or about ourselves. And as I read these two short chapters, I think you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about, and I hope it provides you some hope, gives you a sense of maybe another way of looking at things. So much of how we go through life isn't as much what happens to us as how we react to it, and how we process it. Or I heard one coach say, "How do you frame things that happen to you? What is how do you put them into context? Something happens. How do you see it? How do you experience it? And how do you label it?" These things really matter a lot, because you'll see one person go through a tragedy and somehow come out on the other side stronger and somehow refined and better than they were before it happened, which doesn't mean it was a good thing it happened. I'm just saying they got through it and somehow learned lessons or found character or solutions that just they were better for it in some way. Then you'll see people go through tragedy and it can define the rest of their lives. It can ruin them. It can break them. It can make them bitter or discouraged or despairing, or it can do all kinds of dreadful things. A lot of it has to do with how the person, and this isn't victim blaming, it's just we're conditioned to think about things certain ways. I was raised by my dad to look at things a certain way and practice those things, saw them put to practice, and that's where my worldview comes from in large part. And everyone else has the same thing, but not everybody learned the same lessons. And I also know this, that even if we're raised in whatever kind of environment we are, that's not permanent either. We can learn new ways of looking at things. We can learn new ways of framing things. We can look at new ways of processing things. It takes effort, takes work, takes intentionality, but it is possible. And in fact, it's really a call on our life to do that. I think that's scriptural in the sense of refinement. We're told, well, in Christ we get sanctified, for example. Every religion really has some element of, you are where you are now, but there's a higher, better call. There's a higher, better place. It's also the pursuit of philosophy, human development ideas. Across the board, there's this idea that it's not where we start, it's where we finish. And I just want to share how these two expressions, my dad's handling of them and teaching to us about them, really helped set us on a path of believing in our own resourcefulness, believing in our resiliency, believing that if there's a way to get things done. No loss is permanent, no gain is permanent either. You just keep going. It's kind of a striving mentality, I think, and just this sense that it isn't over till it's over, right? As Yogi Berra said, the baseball catcher, it ain't over till it's over. If there's time on the clock and the game's still going, life is still happening, things can change, things can get better, and we can have an impact. So with all that said, thanks again for tuning in for these and giving me feedback. It helps me stay on task. It helps me think about things in ways that maybe I hadn't already. And I just think it's anything that we can go through with somebody else, going through it together is enhanced and makes it better. And that's what I'm after. I want this to be a good project. I want it to provide something people can use. I want it to help me recall memories that I'm so fond of, and just remember where I come from and where I'm going with it. So with that all said, thanks again for being here. This chapter is called Can't Say Can't. Our dad embodied a spirit of resourcefulness. He truly believed in the adage, where there's a will, there's a way. He made it a point to encourage us whenever frustration overwhelmed us to the point of quitting something. He would help us reframe what was happening. He would tell us stories about people who succeeded in part because they refused to quit. An early story he told me was a legend about the Scottish king Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce was alive back in about the 1100s, I want to say. 1200s, Middle Ages stuff, way back when. But he's a famous Scottish king, and our family has some Scottish heritage, so my dad had interest in Scottish history. And if you ever saw the movie Braveheart, Robert the Bruce is one of the characters portrayed in that movie. I think it's Matthew Broderick. Interesting casting choice, by the way. But Matthew Broderick plays Robert the Bruce in that. And although they didn't directly, that was a little artistic license, those two didn't actually interact in the way it shows them in the movie. They were alive around the same time. And Robert Bruce was a real guy. And he had real problems with the English. So back to the chapter. The story goes that the Bruce had lost yet again to the English, and he had to hide in a forest to avoid being captured. He found refuge in a hollow log. There happened to be a spider spinning a web at one end of the log, and Robert watched it. Time and again, the spider launched across the opening to connect a strand of web, only to fall short. The spider would reset itself and try again. On the seventh try, the spider made the connection. The future king took heart from the spider's persistence and resolved to continue the fight. Ultimately, the Scots won their independence, and Robert the Bruce became the king of the Scots. My dad told us that story a lot, and because he didn't want us to give up. Even if we had to try and try and try, he didn't want us to give up on things. Dad loved stories with this theme, and he applied the lessons to his own life and offered them to us. He really believed that the biggest obstacle for anybody's success was made up of two words: I can't. Every family has its own speech codes, acceptable words and expressions, and the ones that remain off limits and worthy of punishment. In most homes, it's cursing and vulgar language that get the kids in the most trouble. In our home, the expression I can't drew a censor from Dad every time. Mom's language concerns centered more on grammar issues. We found out from each of them that two words didn't actually exist. Mom's was ain't is not a word, and for Dad, there is no such word as can't. We learned that I can't was code for I won't. He instilled in us a confidence to try. He taught us that giving up is the only thing that is certain to end a goal or dream. He would often come back to the principle that a person can achieve anything if they pay the price. If we lacked a skill, learn it or hire somebody with it. Lacked funding, go earn it or borrow it. He wanted us to see life as opportunities and surmountable challenges. He never said it was easy or that we were entitled to any particular outcome. He taught that where opportunities, energy, and smarts intersect, amazing things can happen. Perseverance and resourcefulness make the way to the desired destinations. Obstacles and deficiencies can be accounted for, adapted to, resolved. He knew that frustration with the time lag between an intention and its achievement is where a lot of goals founder. He knew that when we focus on why something is beyond our reach instead of the way to reach it, we can lose hope. Anything between me and my desired outcome is a potential reason to say, I can't do it. Because of the way Dad approached the obstacles in his life, we witnessed the wisdom of rejecting the phrase, I can't. That was one. That was a big one. If we said it, he'd say, just not yet. If it's something we had to learn or grow into, he'd say, it's not that you can't, it's just not yet. Or if it was just something we had to learn or be a little more patient with, take a little bit more time to figure it out, he was always encouraging about that. He'd tell us things like, things are made to work. If it's not working right, maybe you're doing something wrong, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. So think it through. That was another one of his favorite phrases, think it through. And so you take all that, it's just kind of keep your head when things aren't working out. Don't let frustration overwhelm you. Don't let it rob you of your joy or of your goals. It's just something that needs to be figured out. It's not out to get you. It's not personal. It's just something that you either don't know how to do or haven't figured out yet. But it's there for the taking, so to speak, if you just take a minute and use the resources you need to get at it, to get it done. Saw it time and time again in his life, and I've seen it with my brother and the way he approaches his life, and I know it's come into play many, many times in my own life. This book idea is one of those things. It'd be pretty easy to say, I can't do this, I've never done it before, I don't know how to do it, it takes too much time, so on and so forth. And but I keep going back to this philosophy of Dad's, and I'm like, yes, I can do this. I just have to learn. I have to commit the time, the energy. And of course, you're all helping by tuning in and giving me your feedback and comments and things. And I just have a desire to see this thing through. And so I don't think it's going to, I know I can now because I've got it started. And if I can start it, I can finish it in God's good timing and with the kind of effort it deserves. So that's one. And again, that may be expanded on over time, but that's where it's at so far. This one is another expression Dad hated. That's what I called the chapter. Dad valued communication and connection. He sought to know what others thought, and he desired to share his perspective as well. The last thing he wanted was for people to shut up. He wanted them to be open. In our home, telling somebody to shut up would lead to a reprimand and a reminder that we don't settle things that way. He knew that a shut down person is not the same thing as a person in agreement. I know he rejected the might makes right approach. Even in dealing with us as children, he made it a point to give us our say in a matter. I think he really was curious about what we had to say. Dad believed that shutting down a discussion that way was out of line. He didn't rely on it in dealing with any of us, even when we were being our most headstrong selves. He would take on the objection and talk through it. His ban on using the expression extended to the rest of us. He wouldn't let it slide when we used it with anyone. Telling somebody to shut up from a position of authority is little more than bullying one's way through discussion. If somebody shouts it out of frustration or defensiveness, it is rarely effective in reaching a resolution. Dad was convinced that with communication, people could reach an understanding. If there was an impasse, agreeing to take a break or even doing so unilaterally provided a better way forward than hiding behind "shut up." Like the good leader he was, he didn't say one thing and then do another. He did not use the expression himself. I know that he didn't like to settle a discussion merely by pulling rank on us kids or his employees. He understood that shutting down a discussion was not the same thing as resolving it. The shutdown approach usually exacerbates any conflict and leaves the relationship less stable. He approached any discussion with confidence and curiosity. He believed his perspective to be the correct one for him, not necessarily the only one that could work. He usually worked harder to find the best way of doing something than pushing for his way, usually. His approach made for dynamic family discussions. We knew that we would be listened to, not necessarily agreed with, and this resulted in our developing skills of persuasion and listening. We had to know what the other person said to know what we needed to counter. We learned to advocate for ourselves. Now, the downside of this approach was that we also learned how to be contrarian, which came in handy to frustrate a sibling. It looked odd to people used to a more conventional approach to child rearing. It also led my brother and I into more than a few confrontations with adults that did not see the value in trying to persuade a little kid to do as he's told. Looking back, the worst arguments we had ignited when we did not approach them with this attitude of mutual respect. If we made it about winning and losing or who had the clout in the situation, righteous indignation would be added to the dynamic because it felt like somebody wasn't acting in good faith. It was in these situations that I learned the most valuable lessons. Dad knew how to reset a broken conversation. He had the confidence to admit his mistakes, and he was always willing to resume the discussion on better terms. I'm told the span of time it takes to go from indignation and back to calm is recovery time. The other end of that spectrum is resignation. I believe that our family developed a resiliency in conflict, a quick recovery time because of the tone set by our mom and dad. So, as tempting as it is to shut somebody up, to make them stop, to quiet a contrarian voice, um, to trade insults, to try to domineer a conversation, as tempting as all that is, we are human. We have this will to power thing going on. It isn't the best way to get things done. And the way we know that's true is we don't like it when somebody does it to us. That's sometimes the best clue as to whether this is a good action or a bad action is, would I like it if somebody did it to me? Um, Growing up, it was, and all through our lives, we would have healthy discussions, arguments even, um, on matters that, like I say, in most families, a lot of families, I don't know if most is the right word for it, a lot of families just my way or the highway, do it because I said so. I'm the parent, you're the child. Now, granted, there's room for some of that. I mean, there is authority differential, no doubt about that. But dad had this philosophy that he used that sparingly. If he thought there was another way to get buy-in, if he thought there was another way to get us to go to see the wisdom of things, he liked to take that route. And it just, like I said, it led us into thinking of ourselves in a way that we had something to offer, that we had input, that we had a contribution to make. It was expected and it was welcomed most of the time, and it didn't always translate, with other adults, but we never stopped doing it. We never stopped believing in it, and I'm thankful for the lessons. I think it's made me more patient as a parent myself. I think it's made me more patient as a husband and as an employer. At different times, I've managed people, owned a company before too, and I just know that these two concepts of not giving up when it gets really tough or frustrating, and not shutting down conversation or trying to dominate discussion, has made me a better communicator, and I know it's made my life richer. And I just think that these are habits that we develop over time. We pick up these attitudes or not, depending on who we're with, what we were raised with, the kind of experience we've lived through. And my challenge to myself and to anyone else is try living through that, from that stance that can't's not an option. There could be should or shouldn't, could or couldn't, but can't is really more of a resignation, like I'm not even going to try or I'm going to give up. And I don't think that really resolves the issue for us. That's a great way to build regret, giving up before you really find out for sure. Difficulty is not always a signal to quit. It might be a reason to change tactics. It might be a call to bring more resources to bear, but it doesn't always mean quit it. And like I say, Dad was, think it through. Maybe it's just another way to do it, or maybe it isn't the right thing to do to get where you want to be, but don't give up on trying to get to where you want to go. Same thing with communication. One of the lessons I remember earliest on was if I would start to lose my temper. Now, as a little kid, I was pretty temperamental. When I would lose my temper and start, just ranting around, my dad would always say, communicate, communicate, communicate. And somehow that 3-part repetition kind of refocused me back brought me back down, brought my temperature down a bit. And nowadays parents say, use your words. And that was his version of use your words. And it would really help recenter me, and it would keep me realize that there's a way to talk through these things. And that was from a very young age. He would use that expression, and he never lost that. He was always wanting to know what the other person had going on. He was a great conversationalist because he didn't just love telling his own stories, which he clearly did, but he also loved to hear what you had to say, and he wanted to know what you thought about something. And it wasn't just window dressing. He really did want to know. And he liked to, when we would travel with him, we'd go on business trips with him, he would take us along just to see how things worked in his company. And we'd go to seminars and stuff, not constantly, but regularly. And he would ask us after those kind of adult encounters, like business encounters or meetings, and he'd say, well, what'd you think of that? Did you learn anything? What would you have done different? What would you say if somebody said that to you? There was these little coaching sessions that went along with it, and they always revolved around thinking about things from the other person's perspective, not taking their perspective, but understanding it. And you don't get that without hearing them out. Even if they might be saying things you don't like, you still need to know it, or you're not going to have a chance to really connect on some level where you can move the thing forward. So patience in conversation, patience in our effort, steadfastness, stay focused on the goal and not the emotion of the moment, and see what happens. And just takes practice. This takes conscious effort, especially if we're not in the habit of approaching things this way. It means setting aside the familiar for the unfamiliar, and that can be, outside our comfort zone, but really our best growth and our greatest strides in life happen outside our comfort zone, don't they? And so reach a little bit. It's never too late to make a change in life, to make it better, to make it richer, to make it more fulfilling. As long as we're alive, we have the opportunity to do those things. And I think it's unwise to not try, to try and learn other ways of dealing with things. If we're dissatisfied, if we're happy with where we're at and we're kind of dialed in, then that's great too. But just in case, if it's easy to give up, or it's easy to get discouraged, or it's frustrating to have conversations with people that don't agree with you, especially in these charged times. You see it on social media all the time. If you don't like this, I'm not going to friend you anymore. If you do that, we can't be friends. This kind of stuff is toxic in many ways. Now, there are exceptions. Boundaries matter, okay? But we should be wise and discerning and gracious in how we set those. But really knowing what somebody else thinks and why they think it is a worthwhile endeavor. Again, not because we would necessarily want to agree, but it is good to know. And it's where people connect. Without it, we end up in like these silos of isolation and single and closed-mindedness, and that's not healthy for anyone really. So try these two approaches out. Don't say can't, and don't rely on shut up to win an argument, and see if you get something out of all of that. I know it served our father well, and I know it has served our family well over the decades, and I hope to continue to stay in that frame of mind for the rest of the days I have left. Thank you again for being here for this segment of $5 in the World. I hope you enjoyed those 2 short chapters and the ideas behind them or in them, and I look forward to getting together with you again next week on Friday. As I continue to write and add to the stories, I got a couple more that I want to add this week that are 2 of my favorite ones, and they probably won't be the ones I share next week. There's a few others to get to first, but this keeps me moving, it keeps me writing, and I really appreciate you and the time that you take to watch. Feel free to like, share, subscribe. It's free. The subscription doesn't cost you anything. It makes it easier to interact, though, if you do. And I really appreciate whatever promotion you can do with this on my behalf, because the more the merrier. That's it for now. I'm off to Lansing. I'm going to a lecture at East Lansing at Michigan State for old time's sake, and looking forward to that. Just a little bit of recreation this afternoon. That's it for now. I'll see you next week.